when he comes back having won the race, live on air, tells you that he's going to retire. What went through your mind?
Just blank to begin with. I have to be honest. I'd spoken to Carl about it. Carl Hicks, our producer.
Yeah.
I said, I'm going to. Can you just double check how many times he's won? He's ridden 200 winners in a season. So I think it's 10. Carl went off, came back about 20 seconds later. He goes, definitely 10, Rich, definitely 10. So I was saying, because I wanted to ask a question that wouldn't be dismissed. You know, where the way sports people always dismiss their achievements and put it down to someone else doing really well for them or whatever. And so I asked him the question. I said, please don't dismiss this statistic. It's the 10th time you've ridden 200 winners in a season. And of course, I'm expecting some sort of answer with regards to riding 200 winners in a season, how phenomenal that achievement is. And then he completely threw me with, well, I'll tell you something else, Rishi. It'll be the last time I'll be riding 200 winners in a season because I'm going to retire. Whoa! And actually, my first reaction silently was a swear word. And Carl then shouted out to me saying, "Don't stop now, keep going." So I ran. I can't even remember now off the top of my head what the second question was.
Well, it was lovely because it gave me time to think.
Yeah.
I think I said something.
He filled for you.
Yeah.
What prompted that decision? So that was a very special moment.
And he'd given nobody an inkling. I mean, nobody.
I think only his wife and his agent,
Right.
and probably the camera crew that were following me around at the time. But I don't think anyone.
Now we come to.
Now we know, but nobody at the time had. I don't think anyone had an inkling. I think people thought it might be his last season, but I don't think.
Yeah.
I didn't even think it'd be his last season, given the fact he's just ridden 200 winners again and is about to win the title.
You kind of thought he was going to go on forever.
Yeah.
And Nick, you've had some live breaking events to deal with. The stewards reversing the decision on the St Ledger, etc., etc.
I was going to say that was the other one, really. I mean, McCoy and the St Ledger were, apart from the obvious sort of marquee events like the Derby and the Tory and the Grand National, those would be the McCoy and the St Ledger would be the two bits of unscripted theatre, I suppose, that we've had in the year that have worked.
And as a TV presenter, you live for such moments, no?
Absolutely. You get a massive adrenaline rush. Especially the Ledger was great because I think first it showed the network's commitment to the sport, because we could overrun a little, but it was either a question of getting an extra minute or an extra half an hour. And I was shouting down the talkback to Carl, yes, we can do another half an hour, because we had to have the extra to get the whole drama of the stewards' inquiry in. And the access that we've now got to the weighing room, to the jockeys, was all played out brilliantly. And there was a little bit of criticism that we were too intrusive, but if you'd been the director sitting there calling the shots, there's no way you could have come away from those jockeys at that moment. It was great telly. It was brilliant to watch.
And we plan so much.
Yeah.
Obviously not so much Nick and I, but behind the scenes they plan so much for eventualities like what happened at Doncaster on Labour Day. And very rarely do we get the chance to put all those plans into practice. And that was an opportunity to do that. And the guys, the director, producer and all the team behind the scenes, all the things that they'd talked about, all the scenarios that they'd imagined of stewards' inquiries, etc. That was the one moment where everything that they'd planned came off to perfection.
And one thing I say about our team, our production team, is that they're at their best when things get most difficult. And
That's true.
you just had complete confidence in Carl and Denise, our director, and all the team behind you. At one point, Lynn, our PA, was virtually producing the show because Carl's asking for more time from network. Denise is concentrating on the stewards' inquiry, but it was real proper teamwork, and it was a really great show to be part of. That.
But that comes from the experience on the team and perhaps a more sort of journalistic mind amongst all of you.
Well, I think ultimately we're all journalists at different degrees, and when something happens, a news story breaks, I think the journalistic instincts kick in and we go hunting for stories. I mean, even on the day that AP announced his retirement, the people that we were all finding to interview, and we got all the right people on to talk about his retirement. The interviews you did with AP as well as other jockeys in the weighing room, they were all the appropriate ones. And
so then who are you looking for? People who've been at the sort of totemic figures in his career, so Martin Myers, John Joe, Richard John. I mean, it sounds easy, but you want to check all those boxes and make sure that you've covered the story in as much depth as you possibly can.
In days of old, racing folk might have told you where to shove your microphone, but today it seems more trainers, owners are more accepting of your presence, of TV's presence, no?
Well, I think they realise it's in their benefit, especially the younger, not even that young actually. I mean, sort of any trainer under the age of about 50 now is right in there using the medium as a means of promoting their own talent, really, in their own approachability.
In the land of Twitter, some think that Channel 4 Racing's was way more entertaining in the old days, whatever the old days were. What say you?
Yeah, it was much more fun then. It's
It's just a yawn now.
Well, you need a double act, like, you know.
well, the thing. So Rish worked for the BBC.
Yes.
Still does, but worked on BBC Racing.
Yeah.
I was working on Channel 4 Racing for the thick end of 10 years before the new contract started.
Yes.
So we're fairly well positioned to judge the output from then until now. And yes, there are changes, but it's not as radically different in terms of the nuts and bolts of the presentation than it was. And B, if you read some of this stuff, you'd think it was, somewhere between the Fast Show and Morecambe and Wise before, and now it's like watching the Open University. That's just not true.
The old Channel 4 team and the old BBC team both had their fair share of criticism. The old Channel 4 team were criticised for perhaps not taking racing too seriously.
Seriously
and
enough.
taking it, and taking the jokes far more seriously. Yeah. And the BBC were criticised for showing too much fashion at Royal Ascot or not being sharp enough on their racing. Everybody gets criticism, and whoever's in charge at any particular time has to deal with that. And ultimately, I think criticism makes much more noise than praise. And these days, that's what happens. And because Twitter is a microphone for people to make noise, they do.
Yeah.
And also because it's the only terrestrial show in town now, you're gonna take all the heat. It's fine. It's just part of the job. All we can do is do our best and try our hardest to make as good programs. If you do what you're doing well, then I know it sounds simple, but you're on the right track.
Well, the one thing that I feel a bit, I get irritated by.
Tell me.
Is the fact that people seem to think that we get into television and we're interested in becoming TV celebrities or whatever. So I don't think you are. I don't think I am. Certainly, I think people forget that our job is the media. That's the name. We're here to transmit the information, the entertainment that racing puts on for people at home. I think people forget that, and they realise that they sometimes think the problems with the media. The media are only transmitting what the sport is, and sometimes they have to realise that maybe the sport has the problem. I hate to say it because I'm a fan of racing, but the sport might have the problem. And the sooner we realise that is actually the case, then the quicker we might be able to understand
there was
what's wrong.
Good piece in the... Actually, I was quite interested to read in the Racing Post the other day, Martin Cruddas, who is now the boss of ARC, the racecourse group. It said, the question was a very leading question, saying, what would you do about the terminal decline of Channel 4's ratings, or some question like that? And he said, we've got to trust the broadcasters, that they're the people who know how to broadcast. It's up to us to provide the best and most stimulating product we can for them to get their teeth sunk into. We're very lucky. We get to cover brilliant sport on 92 days a year. If you look at network television viewing figures as a whole, insofar as they're any kind of accurate barometer of viewership, and that's a moot point, they are going down across the board because people's viewing habits are changing. Even live events and even live sport viewing habits are changing. And that applies to any sport, essentially, on network television, and any sport on the whole that's not football. Numbers are going down. In that context, ratings numbers have actually held up pretty well. If you were to relativise it to sports like rugby league and snooker and whatever, then the figures are holding up well. So no, I don't think racing's putting on a bad product, and I don't think it's being badly broadcast.
So you disagree?
I'm not saying
you disagree on the product.
No. I just think I agree with Rishi's central point, which is that sometimes when people want to have a moan, they're moaning. If we have a brilliant day's racing, no one moans about the quality of the broadcast. Right. If the product is less than scintillating, then they'll go for the conduit first before the actual product that we're broadcasting.
I think my point is simply the fact that the people who are pointing the fingers at Channel 4, who call themselves racing fans, need to perhaps look at the product that we are transmitting before looking at who's transmitting it.
Agreed.
And just going back to Nick's point about viewing figures, when I worked for the BBC, the viewing figures for Royal Ascot and for the Derby declined, and we were criticised. The BBC were criticised for allowing the viewing figures to decline. Now, those same viewing figures that the BBC were criticised for are now being held up as a barometer for Channel 4's failings and saying, well, what? So, at which point do we decide to say, right? Well, what's the common denominator here?
Also, it's my view that people tune in because they want to watch the sport.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And you can talk about viewing figures and analyse them. That's fine. That's everyone's entitled to do that. You can talk about the editorial and say, I think Nick Luck's rubbish and I think Rishi Persad's brilliant, or whatever, or vice versa.
Probably not most people.
But to be fair, but to conflate the two, I think is bogus.
Yeah.
Because I don't think there's any evidence to suggest that people tune in to watch presenters. I mean, we've had star-name presenters on this show. We've hired people with big profile, whatever. There's no correlation between who's doing the show and what the numbers are.
There was
it's what racing is showing.
Huge
That's why
article
9
in the
million
Racing
people watch the
Post
Grand
calling
National.
for a certain unnamed presenter on another channel to be given the job at Channel 4 to save the viewing figures. And then in the same article, the same person highlighted all the people that work for the BBC when they were, hang on a second, you've got people that work for the BBC, including their main presenter.
Including you.
Yeah.
And look at all the numbers you've put on.
Well, exactly. To be fair, what would happen if you took me, Claire, and Nick Fitzgerald away?
I mean,
disaster.
It
doesn't matter.
Explode.
But I don't know about you, but I don't remember
We're talking ourselves
ever
out of a job
watching.
here, you realise that?
What?
I don't ever remember watching a sport and saying I'm watching cricket, football, golf, tennis because of as good as Richie Beno has been, a legend, as good as Peter Sullivan.
I wouldn't want to get too defensive about it. It's absolutely perfectly justifiable for people to critique the editorial.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I mean, that's that. Why not?
But you don't turn off watching an event because of who's broadcast.
Yeah, to relate a trend in viewing figures to the sort of surface presentation, if you like, I think is pretty bogus.
You're not a fan of sport.
And finally, gentlemen, we all know around this table in this room that a lot of TV presenters don't get to work on content or present programs they like, enjoy, or whatever. It's a working gig. It's a gig.
Yep.
You work on this. You work on Channel 4 Racing, and you love racing. I mean,
it's brilliant. I mean, that's why I said I don't want to. A lot of the questions you've asked are based on other people's perceptions of whatever. So
I asked one question on other people's perceptions, and you gentlemen ran with it at great length, and I thank you for doing that. But fair point, man. Fairness to me,
but I did say I don't want to get too defensive.
I didn't come in here with a negative agenda
because we do have a lot of fun doing this.
We do have a lot of fun, but I do feel sometimes. Well, I get a bit defensive sometimes because ultimately everybody here works hard, to do the best we can, and we're doing the best we can with what we have. And it annoys me when people have a go at the whole team because they do so much hard work to try and put the best product out there. And we are lucky. We are lucky at what we do. I mean, I absolutely love working on horse racing. It's all I ever wanted to do. I had a row with my parents when I was 19. About working in. I said I wanted to work in racing, and my dad was a lawyer, and my mum was a professional, and they both were so disappointed with my mum more than my dad. And I had a row because I wanted to work in racing. That's all I ever wanted to do. So I'm living out my dream.
Yeah.
But it does annoy me that other people who are working hard, perhaps people who aren't living out their dream and doing this as a job, they're getting criticised for stuff that's not within their power whatsoever. And that's sometimes when you asked that question earlier, and I ran with it. Or we ran with it. It's because I feel that they are wrongly unjust. It's unjust.
Also, I think the team of people we work with is just exceptional.